Welcome everyone, thank you for taking the time to watch my video presentation. My name is Craig Gamble. I'm a assistant professor at Kwansei Gakuin University. Today's presentation is on learner attitudes and receiving video feedback. So I've practiced this presentation a few times, and 20 minutes is quite short, so I'm going to do my best to try to stay within the time limit. So today, first I'm going to start with some background on feedback, and I'm going to mostly just show the slides and not really talk in depth about the content, and I'm going to try to hopefully spend most of my time in the last part discussing the students' actual responses and things. Okay, so I'll do my best to try to get through everything as quickly as possible and clearly as possible. So here we go. So just to get us started, so we just have a basis for today's presentation. Essentially, feedback is enabling students to improve on future performances, right? So we want them to take our comments and make improvements for next time, right? Whether that's a presentation or their essay that they're writing, that kind of thing. However, feedback remains one of the least popular educational experiences among students. So there's some kind of issue going on with students and their perceptions of feedback. Okay. So for a little bit of context, written comments still remain one of the most widely used methods providing feedback. And so the students have some issues about its ineffectiveness with this type of method alone. So some of the limitations or issues or frustrations that have been identified in previous research, right, include the timing and the quality. So obviously, if you have experience with 25 students in a writing class and they're all writing an essay, it's very time consuming to try to provide feedback on each individual student's papers, and also providing the quality depth of comments to help them improve. So these are some of the limitations that students have acknowledged in previous research. And what it also lacks is that kind of student-teacher interactions, right? And so this lack of teacher interactions or lack of nonverbal communication tools or cues, excuse me, can often lead to difficulty in understanding what the teacher or the educator wants them to do with the feedback. So this can lead to student misrepresentation of the content or even disengagement. So sometimes maybe a student gets their feedback and they might understand what we mean, the teacher means, and they make their best attempt to try to make improvements, but it's still wrong. Or they might just don't understand what the teacher is really asking them to do, and they get a little bit frustrated, and they might just delete the comment, ignore the comment altogether, and submit the paper with the same mistake, speaking from experience. So these are some things that are really, really important if we're talking about the ineffectiveness of feedback and why it's not perceived very well currently. So the feedback is really dependent on how the students perceive it. So if they're having issues with it, we've got to find ways to kind of adapt or improve the way we provide feedback to the students. So one of those ways is video feedback. So for myself, over the last 2 years, right, teaching from home a lot of the time, I started doing a lot more screencasting, providing comments. Mostly it started with providing comments for students, so how-to videos and stuff to do their homework. But then I started using a lot for feedback, right? And so that's kind of where I got started with this exploratory study and research. So screencasting, if you're unfamiliar with that, is what I'm doing right now. You have my face and I'm talking simultaneously about the content on the screen. I'm currently using Loom, L-O-O-M, but you can also use Microsoft PowerPoint has an option to do, or Zoom. A lot of students have experience now using Zoom. So I think that perhaps over the last 2 years, the educational technology has provided new ways to improve upon previous video feedback, or even given more people opportunity to provide video feedback, right? Making the tech easy to use, especially for teachers, that kind of thing. So one of the things that are advantageous with video feedback is it has a multimodal nature, right? There's a lot of things that we can do with it. And from the previous research, there are lots of things that have been researched on video feedback, but there's three main ones that have kind of repeatedly been identified in the previous research. And those are going to be the higher quality, more personalized, and greater engagement. So these are the three things that I'm going to focus on in this presentation, but also what was kind of the focus for my research. Okay, so let's quickly just go through each of these three and what they kind of mean in a little bit more detail. So previous research identified higher quality as being more detailed and more extensive. So obviously being able to provide more information. As you can see from the two examples here, almost twice as many words in a video than in text-based feedback alone. And a typical 5-minute video can contain up to 625 words. So that's a lot of words, a lot more detail that can be provided, in maybe definitely a lesser amount of time. And then there's also clearer and easier to understand. And this happened to be because of the visual and vocal cues that are afforded through video feedback. So there was fewer instances of misunderstanding of the content because the students could better understand what the teacher's trying to convey in the written comment by explaining it visually and audibly, right? More personalized. So this means that there was less likely to offer generic comments. So even if students having the same kind of mistakes as other students, because you're almost speaking to them like I am now in almost a one-on-one convention, it felt more teacher-student connections, right? You have that, almost felt like a face-to-face meeting. And by referencing student names, right, to a high degree, or even adding greetings or fatics, right, we're building that kind of social relationship, that communication between the students. So it feels like a one-on-one meeting talking about the students' content, right, whether it's an essay or maybe you're reviewing a outline for a presentation, that kind of thing. So the face-to-face was a big thing, right? So what this means was that if the students feel more valued as individuals, then there is a greater engagement or acknowledge of greater engagement, meaning that the students would view the feedback multiple times. They took it upon themselves to take notes and pausing and rewatching. They felt that was advantageous. And they acknowledged spending more time accessing the video. Okay, which also encouraged them to be a little bit more critical reflection, right? So you're kind of building some of this learner autonomy, autonomous learning going on if they're reviewing the content more times. Okay, so these are the three kind of elements that have been highlighted in previous research related to the advantages of video feedback, okay, over written feedback. And this is kind of what's led me into my exploratory research. So a lot of the empirical research that I've highlighted so far in the previous slides, most of them have been in L1 contexts, very few of them within L2, and even more so, very, very few have actually been conducted within Asia or in Japanese context specifically. So this kind of led me to my two research questions. We want to know what our Japanese L2 learners think about video feedback and whether those attitudes and beliefs are in line with the literature. So for my study, a very small study, only about 48 students, mostly female, and by year, mostly first-year students. So my expectation was that a lot of these students probably have little or no experience with video feedback. And then just a breakdown of their departments, so good variety of students from different backgrounds and things. The study was over 14 weeks. It was a kind of a mixed method through a survey. So I had the quantitative data, and then I had some open-ended written response questions for the qualitative. So I'm not going to spend too much time here on this data. I just want to highlight that for all of the statement items, the students responded positively, right? They agree, or either they strongly agree. Except for statement number 9, which means more teachers should provide video feedback. So they acknowledge that there are some positive things about video feedback, but they're still hesitant to maybe accept it nonstop, right? Regardless. So I'm going to kind of maybe refer to this a little bit later in the other slides coming up. So the first open-ended question was talking about the benefits of receiving video feedback. So as you can see here, some of the top 3 or the most frequent responses was better understanding, the video audio cues, and then more convenient. So seems to be in line with some of the previous research, right? So the students acknowledged that they felt it was easier to understand the feedback because of through the video feedback mode. Some of the comments here, I think I understand better than the written material what I need to correct because the teacher actually talked to me along with the video. So again, right, our comments in our minds as teachers, we might feel that the comment on the side of their paper is enough for the students to understand what they need to do to make corrections and improve, but our assumptions might not match with those what the students feel. So the idea is that the student can see my comment written on the paper, but then I'm explaining what that comment means in a little bit more information and detail. So together with the written comment and my explanation, they feel a lot more confident that they better understand what they need to do to make corrections and improvements. And so it seems logical then that they thought that the audio-visual cues were of great benefit for their feedback. Because I can see the teacher's face, it's easy to see the teacher's facial expressions and manner of speaking, which points need to be corrected the most. That's really important. Again, so if we want to emphasize in a paper, I could say, well, Takumi, you're doing a good job here, just make a few comments. But this section right here, this paragraph, this is where you have the biggest issue in your writing. This is where I want you to spend the most time making improvements. So by being able to convey that with my stress and tone of my voice, the students can better understand, like, okay, if I focus a lot on this part, I can get a better grade, right? So the audio-visual cues are very advantageous for helping students to better understand the feedback that they receive. They felt it was more convenient. That's kind of interesting because I'll talk about this in the next slide. I can get the response in no time. So talking about quicker response time, I do agree with that. I felt as a teacher I was able to provide more content, better content like feedback, but also I could do it much quicker. The turnover between the students submitting an assignment and me giving them feedback was much quicker, and I think the students acknowledged that as well. Yeah, the teacher's more accommodating, so more personal, more detail. There's a lot more information and reaction than written. Sure, makes sense. And then maybe being able to practice their listening was kind of a sub benefit, right? A secondary benefit. The next one is what I want to focus on for a few minutes here, as this is where I had a lot more of a teacher reflection, was especially on the drawbacks, because I understand the students' responses and I could acknowledge them, and I hope to convey my experiences here to help better understand for the audience here. So I'm going to ignore the first one. No drawbacks, fine, great. It's easy for them to say. The biggest one for me would be the next couple. So difficulty listening. I found even when I reviewed some of the videos I made for students that I might start slowly with my speaking, but the longer the video went, I naturally just started speaking a little bit more faster and more natural. So as an educator or teacher, if you're going to provide video feedback, you really need to be able to maintain that level of speed, but also word choice that you use. So even though it feels a lot more casual one-on-one conversation with a student like I'm doing now, it's easy to get away from remembering Takumi is this level or this confident with his listening, so I need to make sure I maintain my speaking speed and the word choices that I use to match that student's ability. And so I think students maybe felt it was difficult to listen because of maybe the word choices I was using to explain the feedback, or my pace of speaking was a little bit faster than their ability. So that's really important for educators to be aware of. The next one, though, I think can be not superficial, but I think can be improved upon, is if teachers do more of a teacher training, just a little bit of training to tell the students how they should be using the video feedback. Instead of just saying, here's your video feedback, please make corrections and submit your next paper. So students felt, for example, every time I want to listen again, I have to start the video and I have to look back to where I see the teacher said. Well, for example, on Loom, you may click on any part of the video and you can leave a thumbs up sign or a clap sign. So, and those icons get saved. So next time you open up the video, those icons will still be there. So if the students understand that if there's an important thing for them to remember, they can save that icon. So when they review the video again, they can just skip right to the icon that they left. So they will be able to access the video and the content that they want more quickly. So I only showed the students how to do Loom, how to make Loom videos and how I was using it, but I didn't really train them on how to use it for feedback purposes, right? And so that's something that I would be doing from the next time I use video feedback. So I think if teachers do a little bit of training with the students how to use video feedback, then I think their concerns about being less convenient can be limited. And the next one, really important, is the length of videos. So it's a double-edged sword, I think. Obviously, you can say a lot more content and provide a lot more detail, but also it gets really tiresome the longer the video goes, right? There's more to be listening. Your students' brains and get a little tired listening to a lot of English. So I think that's where future research or more research would need to be, is what is the ideal length of video feedback? Is it 5 minutes max? Is it under 5 minutes? That kind of thing. So in hindsight, for a student research paper, I should have broken up the videos into parts. So just look at the introduction video and then maybe a body video and then a conclusion video and a reference list video. Breaking those up individually rather than one long video. So the length of videos is really, really important. I think short and concise is obviously always going to be much more productive. But it also means you might need to do more of them. Depends on the content or the context or the assignment being done. And then lastly is really important, demotivating. So these are only maybe 2 students that responded to this, but I can understand their feelings. So as it says here, it's easy to get mentally hurt when the teacher keeps pointing out things. Well, yes, it's that fine, again, double-edged sword, not double-edged sword, but balance between positive criticism and positive reinforcement. But I would also want to focus here on the tone of voice. Again, reviewing some students' videos, it's very easy to tell sometimes in the tone of the voice when you're a little bit frustrated with a student, right? And the tone gets presented that way. And so several times I had to the first few I didn't realize it, and then I'd have to go back and make new videos because I let more of my emotional tones be conveyed in my feedback, where I was getting a little bit frustrated, irritated, and that can be demotivating for students. So when providing video feedback, really important that you maintain that more positive tone and stress in the voice and how you present the content, even if a little bit frustrating. So that was something that I had to kind of pay attention to and learn from. Right, so it was a learning experience for both of us. Okay, I'm going to quickly move on because I'm already at 20 minutes. So the biggest difference is more personal. So students did recognize that the video feedback was more personal and easier to understand, and they acknowledged the audio video cues again and more information. So these are the biggest things that they pointed out, which seem to be in line with the literature. And I'll kind of just leave this up here and you can kind of read some of the student content. And then overall, how did you feel? So again, very strongly, 82% of respondents felt pretty positive about video feedback. There was a few mixed feelings, right? And neutral, it's hard to evaluate because I'm not really used to it. Really good point. And it's a little bit what I might have expected doing this exploratory research, but I didn't expect a lot of the students to have experience with video feedback. And I think the students' comment is right on the nail. I think if students, as you can see here, they recognize that there's a lot of positive things about video feedback, but as we saw in the quantitative data, they're still a little bit hesitant to receive it. So I think that the more students get experience using or receiving video feedback, they will better understand or better appreciate the value of that form of feedback that they're receiving. So I thought that was a really, really important one. I don't think I would use it again. The written form is better. It's easier to understand writing. So it's not for everyone. Fair enough, right? Again, that could also go down to things that, as a teacher, might not have paid attention to. Was my tone of voice positive enough for the student? Was my speaking speed and my language use in my feedback equivalent to their ability, so they felt confident to use the video? So if not, then it might negatively affect their perceptions of this form of feedback. So there's a few variables that need to be considered here. So in conclusion, to surmise here, I think that the responses in this small study here highlight that they acknowledge that there is some higher quality, easy to understand, more detail that matches the literature, and the same thing with being more personalized. They, especially with the comments and the responses to audiovisual engagement with the teacher. Although I don't feel that there is enough data or responses to say that that video feedback provided greater engagement. I think that also has to do with the lack of experience with it, or not trained especially on how to use video feedback. So I think there is a possibility that there is for them to do that, but I don't think it was demonstrated here. And that's kind of what I've kind of said here, right? So there's still some mixed feelings, hesitancy, but they do recognize the benefits. So with more experience and training, I think the students would appreciate or see the positive advantages that video feedback provides. Okay, I'm already over, so I'm going to try to quickly finish here. So thank you for taking your time to watch my video presentation. You can contact me at my Gmail address here, or LinkedIn, or on ResearchGate if you want to follow and read the paper on related to this presentation. And I'm just going to quickly move my face if anyone is interested in some of the resources or references that I've used here. And I'll just kind of quickly go through these real quick. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you staying to the end and watching. And I'll talk with some of you hopefully at the conference. Enjoy the rest of the presentations. Thank you very much.